lead the practice of governance, and I'm a principal consultant. And with me is my friend and somebody who I admire a lot, Cortnie Abercrombie, who is a legend in the space of AI and automation systems and governance and so much more. So Cortnie, it is a real pleasure to have you with us, and I would love the audience to know more details about what you're doing right now and a little bit about your organization as well as the book that has just come out.
Well, that's a lot. And thank you for this warm introduction. And I feel the exact same way about you, Paola. So the feeling is definitely mutual. Thanks for inviting me to come and have this opportunity to speak to the audience about AI ethics and responsibly, fulfilling AI requirements. Which is not always easy, as we know. So a little bit about what I'm doing right now. I am the CEO and founder of AI Truth, which is a 501c3 nonprofit. We are focused on helping the public be aware of what's going on that impacts their lives. Everything from how AI can impact your job to your kids and how they interact with social media and what gets pushed to them, thanks to AI recommendation engines, all the way through to businesses and how they can follow these 12 tenets of trust that we have on the AI Truth website. Everything from, making sure that they're using AI in a humane way, all the way through to how do I govern this stuff when it's generative, especially, and then how do I remediate, if something does go wrong. And, the chances are if you're using AI and it's a machine that's learning, and just like when humans learn, we make lots of mistakes too. So the thought that we can set it and forget it is not, that's not a valid thought. So we have to do these things. And we also work with some of the government agencies to try and help. So groups like Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and those to help understand, where the risks are when AI comes into play. Because so many, HR professionals don't necessarily know how vendors of artificial intelligence solutions that are for hiring, how they go about what they're doing. And so, we look at ways to help different organizations, always with the thought that we are here to help, not point fingers, because this is too early for everybody to play a blame game of any kind. We know that there are some very few out there who are really just trying to, do the wrong things. But I think a lot more are trying to just do the things, and they don't really think about that they might be actually not doing this the ways that are the best. So that's what AI Truth is here to help with. And that being said, there's a lot of talk right now about generative AI, which includes, to my last count, there's like 6 main generative AIs out there. We just saw the release of Google Bard, which is a ChatGPT rival, is a large language model version. And then we also know, all of us who have played with Midjourney and DALL-E, that those image-based generative AI models are out there as well. And we know that there's also an open source version of these as well. So it's an exciting time to be in AI, and especially in trying to help people understand how these technologies work and how they can use them responsibly inside their organization. Did I cover all of the main questions? And I wrote a book. Yes. Thank you. And I wrote a book. Hopefully it's centered. I'm not good at mirroring myself, but this book I wrote for everybody to understand, everybody from just your normal, average, everyday person who is not a techno person at all, a non-techie. I wrote it in ways that they can understand, and it can be accessible. There is no reason for us to not be able to understand what AI actually is. And so I kind of take everybody through what is it in very layman's terms, in ways that you can relate. And then I talk about where it is in our lives that we may or may not be aware of, that can actually impact some of our life, liberties, and happiness. And then I kind of talk about, here's some of the business models and the business places that we use it the most. And it's kind of boring, honestly. While there's a lot of stuff getting, big recognition right now, I wouldn't say largely every organization's out there by any stretch of the imagination using things like generative AI at this point. Most are like dabbling with machine learning, which is a form of narrow AI, not necessarily like these big, huge, Skynet types of projects. But the ones that you find on the news are going to be the extreme cases, not the majority of cases. So we need to have awareness that this exists, but it's, I want to encourage everybody that it's still nascent. We can still all get in this boat together and learn about AI and be on the same journey. It's not like some people are just getting left behind and there's no hope of trying to understand AI or even catch up. That's not true. Everybody can understand it. Everybody can take back some control for themselves. And that's what the book is about. It's literally called What You Don't Know, AI's Unseen Influence in Your Life and How to Take Back Control. That last part I took very seriously. How to take back control.
And master the tool, right? And
that's right.
And put the human back in control, we've always been in control, but it just appears sometimes that things are overrun. And that's the first also norm of governance, just control it. And by control, it doesn't mean oppress it, just govern it in a way that it makes sense and that is practical and that is useful and productive and helpful.
Exactly. Every technology always had that double-edged sword of I can do bad things with it or I can do good things with it. Or I can just do mediocre things, which let's face it, there's a lot of mediocre things going on that a lot of people would yawn at, but they're cost-saving mechanisms right now. In a time of high inflation, there's going to be more and more. And what you said about keeping the human in the loop, that is the big struggle when it comes to these technologies, because you have two levers basically inside of companies. One is I'm going to make revenues, or one I'm gonna cause less cost. So either way, right now we're looking at a lot of companies in this inflationary time are gonna cause less cost, right? So that means to me that's a signal of automation, a lot of trying to get more out of less, which means a lot of efficiencies. And so I'd say in this case, this is when we have to be very careful because humans are going to get even more removed from the loop as we see more automations popping up. Instead, though, what we need to see is actually a doubling down of efforts for every dollar that we're investing in these new things that are unknown in how they perform. We need to be seeing twice the money being spent on how we govern these things. But unfortunately, we are not seeing that. As we've seen it with Microsoft's latest news, it's just not happening because they're investing billions in OpenAI and ChatGPT and so forth. But we're seeing that they're also laying off responsible AI groups within the organization. And that's a very risky and scary move, honestly.
Yes. So let me have you pause there for a moment and ask you a question. If I'm a CEO of a mid or large organization, I'm getting a lot of push from my tech teams, innovation teams, scientists, etc. Let's bring in more AI. Let's make things more efficient. There are great case studies. This actually works already, even in the financial sector. And I am not very tech driven, so I need to discern what I'm hearing and make wise decisions and present it to the board. What is it that you really want to lock for this individual that is making the first steps of discerning how much to bring in? We know that a lot of it is already in through suppliers and partners, etc. But from the point of view of just raw innovation within house, what would you like them to hone in and anchor as they make these decisions and bring in more AI?
The biggest thing is that you need to always be visiting and this is true in any technology actually, but especially AI. You'll always need to visit your value statements within the company, your own personal values as well, because we know that we can't just leave those behind either. And assuming that your values align with your company's values, you have a strong case for then, do your policies actually match your corporate values? And why is that important when we start talking about AI? Because the first thing that data scientists have to do is understand what is acceptable within this company, what is an acceptable amount of risk, an acceptable way to treat people, especially when we talk about AI that is in hiring, recruitment, employee ratings, automations. Is it acceptable to just lay off half of a workforce just like that? Or should it be something that they look at reskilling and trying to get other parts of their strategy fulfilled? If that's a value and something that is in the policies of a corporation today, then the urging of data scientists to follow that. So if I was a CEO today, I would look at my value system. I would look at all the areas of inefficiency that I feel like are low-hanging fruit that possibly could be tackled with AI. I would make sure that those are very strategic use cases. And then I would personally want to start reaching out and building an external board that could actually give me some feedback about those specific, especially if I know nothing as a CEO about these types of areas that I would be looking at. So let's use, for an example, the hiring or the ratings app, or applications that we know AI can be put toward. If that's an area that you think, okay, I need to just make sure I have the best, as I have to cut a percentage of workers, which we've seen happening, it just happens in business. It's not, nobody likes it. It's not the thing you want to be doing, but you want to make sure that you have like just your cream of the crop that's left. Then a lot of companies that are larger are turning towards AI to help them with that because they think, well, maybe this will give me a chance to be less biased. But you have to get under the covers of how did these AI vendors work then? How did this algorithm get developed? And so you have to turn towards vetting. So you have to look, there's quite a few documents out there today that help vet. I helped with the World Economic Forum's HR one, for example, that give you oversight on how to, or insight on how to vet vendors in this way. So, I mean, it really depends on where you're going to try to either cut costs or make revenues, your use cases that you're going to look at, and your corporate policies that you have in place to protect. So then you look at, well, what training do I have based on my corporate policies? Have I trained the data scientists and the vendors in my company's strategic values? If I haven't, then I need to look at, well, let's get those people trained. And then we need to look at if they still won't follow the transparency and the explainability that I need to understand if my corporate values are being met. Then you start looking at how am I going to pay these people? And can I pull some levers through procurement? I've seen that a lot lately, actually, developing policies around procurement of vendors in this AI space so that they can't get paid without meeting all of the requirements. That's a powerful lever.
That is a powerful lever. Now let's unpack that just a little bit further. So from values to training, and by values incorporating both risk and legal, I would imagine, right? Having those teams already calibrate how the values get spelled out through the policies and standards, but also how they make their way to an algorithm. So if I'm a data scientist and I get my company policy, I understand what they mean, I kind of know what the impact would be as I implement AI, but there's still one more layer. Like, I can see all the capabilities. The policy doesn't quite address that. The guideline doesn't give me that, but it's so neat. It's right here. Should I not? I'm the only one who really gets to say, yes, open that up or not. How do you bring it down to that really tactical level that empowers the individual, one, to ask either more questions, or two, to know based on those values and mission, yep, that's the right door to go down, or that's not the right one.
So the algorithms, we all think of algorithms, and we're interchangeably, people use the term model, algorithm, what else? Math. I mean, all kinds of the computer. They mean it in terms of the computer code sometimes, but let's be clear. An algorithm is just a set of instructions. That is literally all it is. It's just the logic. It's the logic. It's the, if this happens, then this happens, and then that happens, and then this happens. But neural nets are like that on steroids. Even the way that we cluster things, even in certain types of training of these, models, basically we're still just giving them like instructions. If it's red, then this. If it's this, then that. And it gets even more compounded in complexity when we start adding also that there's going to be an instant decisioning and an automated action. The minute that we have an instant decisioning capability and an instant automated action, we have gone from our values into coding decisions. Our values are all about making decisions. Today, oh, someone dropped $20. Am I going to pick that up and go chase them down and give it to them? Or am I going to just stick it in my pocket because it's easy? And I'm going to say this is not going to sound very nice. There are, in data scientists, there are both people just like there are in real life. You're going to have the data scientists like, nope, that's too much trouble. I'm just going to stick that in my pocket. Or you're going to have data scientists that will be like, no, I'm going to go chase them down and I'm going to give them that $20 back. It's the same without oversight, but your values get codified into these large, impactful models that are scoring is the difference. And producing scores on tons. And my supreme example of that is the Equifax case, where we saw I think it was this past summer, where we saw like 160 million people's scores were affected by algorithms. And of course, these are designed so that the minute that score is produced or updated from the new information flowing in, because we can't think about data stagnantly when we think about AI. The whole purpose is to be constantly changing, constantly moving with the flow, right? Learning as we go. We're putting in more data and it's just flowing through and we're producing out scores and those scores are flowing through and they're ever changing over time. But if we think about the fact that it's all instantaneous, this data comes in, it goes back out. This data comes in, it goes back out. Where is it going to? Well, in this case, unfortunately, those scores went out to all the biggest banks in the world. And the people who could very least afford to have their credit impacted. And what I mean is, we don't necessarily understand, if you're in a good situation with your credit scores, you don't understand how much your credit scores actually affect everything in your life, from how much you pay for insurance to what kind of house and where and what zip code you can afford, which then impacts what kind of education your kids get. I mean, it's all related. So if we have, senior leadership like CEOs such as Equifax that say things like, well, it was a coding error. It's fine. It's a coding error. That's not a coding error. You just affected 160 million people's lives, and a lot of them down at that area that cannot afford to have that kind of a blip happen to them. $2,500 to a rich person is nothing. $2,500 to someone who barely makes $2,500 in 2 or 3 months is a lot. And we have to take this with the seriousness as data science professionals, as leaders in this space. We have to take this with this level of seriousness, that if we are going to impact people with what we produce, that is part of our value system. And our value systems are codified in there. If the Equifax data scientists had more oversight built in, or let's say they actually had, sometimes it's not even just the case of oversight. Sometimes the people who are supposed to be overseeing make a decision because it's the fastest thing and they don't want to ruffle feathers. They say, well, we could do that, but it may be a little more expensive to go back and correct all of the mistake that we had to come in. Or we could fix this in the future so it never happens again, but we'll have to intercede and rebuild everything so that we can actually document all the data sources in a way that if we have drift, we can actually see it coming through. That's going to be an investment. That's going to take time. That's going to take a lot of resources, and we don't have time and resources right now. But the alternative is, are you willing to affect 160 million people? That comes back to your value system and your corporate policies. If your corporate policy, if your corporate value statements are that we will protect our customers no matter what, and then you let something like that happen, you have just lost face with the public. You've lost face with your stockholders. Your ESG program has probably gone on the social side because, the ESG, environmental, social governance, every board that I know of has to answer to that. Even private boards have to answer to that nowadays, to investors. Investors are getting more savvy by the minute. And if you hope in this bad environment to keep your investors happy, you want to invest in these types of oversight technologies, because when you start dabbling in AI, it can change so fast. The data can be corrupted. There can be all kinds of fraudulent things that happen where, maybe there's a malicious actor that wants to get access to your customers, or a contingent of your customers, or maybe they just want to do you in as a matter of competition. We've seen lots of underhanded things from all around, internationally, domestically, everywhere. So it's an interesting environment to be in right now.
It is. It reminds me many years ago when we tried to convince the business that cybersecurity was not a digital problem, it was actually a business problem.
Yes.
And we had such a hard time because they saw the complexity of everything related to cyber, including the technology that has AI as well. And they yielded more and more the decisions at all levels to the technology teams. But yet it remains today still a business investment decision based on your level of tolerance for risk and your willingness to incur liability or not. So the question that I have for you, Cortnie, you've seen so much in this space, is litigation going to catch up, or is litigation already where you think is going to stay for a long time, or is that lever going to be pulled to a degree where now you're going to see some course correction on the policy side or on the due diligence or on the governance side? Is that even a factor that you see heavily present?
Well, to get the true litigation that we really would, like to see. Right now they can violate your privacy 10 ways to Sunday in America, and there's no recourse other than the public's going to despise you for a second, and then when the next news story comes out, then maybe they don't anymore. I don't know. I personally feel like the Cambridge Analytica, that level of manipulation and violation of privacy has stuck with a lot of us for a very long time. The public at large, I say, not just us in the professional space of looking at this, data privacy and security, but everybody. So I think as we see more of these kinds of cases come out, and some of the quite frankly flippant remarks and reactions from some of the lip service from a lot of the company leaders, I think we're learning very quickly who we can trust and who we can't trust. And I think when there are alternatives, like unfortunately, the Facebooks of the world don't really have a huge alternative that's any better than themselves. So right now, the mass public doesn't turn to a more trusted source because those trusted sources are in launch phase right now. I think maybe they'll gain more over time. And I'm seeing promising things from the younger generation. I know we kind of rail on them, but I'm starting to see some promising behaviors from them because they're very aware. The Gen Z high schoolers that I've been doing a project with, they are pretty amazing because a lot of them, I said, well, what all social media platforms do you have right now, and what do you think about those? And they say, well, I had to cut off Instagram because it was getting too addicting. And I just felt like I was being manipulated constantly. And I was like, whoa, what? Really? You actually felt that way? And they're like, yeah, we did. And so, it wasn't healthy, the stuff that they were showing. And I thought that's a refreshing viewpoint because we don't always think of, the younger generation like that. So I was very excited and pleased to see that acknowledgement is there. And I think, sadly, the acknowledgement is more there than our generation, maybe, who's just like, just give me what I want. I don't care. Sure, I'll give you my date of birth and everything you need for me to triangulate my credits, my credit and steal my identity for a 5-cent coupon. It's like, yeah, no, I feel like, this upcoming generation's getting a little bit better about, no, you can't have everything about everything. Yes. And they're also getting they were also, I'm observing using more stealthy techniques to get onto different technologies too, so that they don't give away their identity, which is, that's another thing that I think, as we get more into technology, companies are going to have to remember who they're dealing with and how they're dealing with them.
And now we have potentially a new level of addiction, right? Between ChatGPT, Bard, etc. I mean, that has gained so much ground that even the sites indicate we just have too much going on. We have too many users, so we're pausing for a few hours or so, which was surprising to see the other day. But what is that? So walk us through that generative AI and what it's doing to folks today, good and bad and ugly.
I don't really know what it's doing to folks, but I know that I think like with everything, I can only just imagine how cars must have been back when in the times of horse and buggies, and how everybody must have lined up, as the one car in the hundreds of households as it would drive by. I would just imagine that people probably came for miles just to see what that thing looked like, right? And I think we have, in many cases, the same kind of attention right now to generative AI because it is so much fun to play with. And now they've just made it available. It's like if the first cars had been suddenly made available to play with, I think we would have seen back in the horse and buggy days, they would have had a line for miles to come play with it, right? I think that's what we're seeing. That being said, though, I mean, there's definitely an investment, and cars definitely were here to stay, right? I mean, but I do think now we just kind of take for granted we're all going to have cars, and we drive them everywhere, and they get us to and from, and we don't have to schedule subways, or, well, some of us do because we live in big cities, but for the most part, at least in Texas, that's how you get around. And I think in the future, that's how generative AI will be. But the question will be, the part that concerns me the most is just that we're still living in this black box era. And so we don't know what is going into this. And I pressed ChatGPT like nobody's business on a regular basis to understand what sources did it use to give me specific information, factual type queries. So when I say factual, I mean things like, can you tell me how much cancer is in the world? Or, things that have actual statistical numbers, but it cannot tell you where it's getting them, but yet it produces them. Right. And I think even if we dealt with humans who couldn't tell us where their sources were, we would have to doubt. So yes. I hope that level of human, objectivity about, where'd you get this? Like that, I want that to stay. I want people to continue to be, what's the word I'm looking for when you doubt? Just always have a little bit of doubt and question everything. Keep questioning. Do not accept just because it's easy to accept. And plus, we still always need to be able to cite sources and understand where information comes from. And if we can't, then we can't expect OpenAI to do well in the future, I think. And I'll add an extra level of complexity that I think nobody's really thinking of yet, but we should be thinking about it. When we start having AIs negotiating with other AIs, these policies of when does that AI, so especially like in the case of digital assistants, like let's say my digital assistant is going to negotiate with Paola's digital assistant about what time we can meet, or it's going to try to something like this. Something as innocuous as that. But I tell it, well, it's observed from the things that I've taught it, that it should always win. Then who knows to what levels it could, if I don't have values trained into it, right, about, when to back down and when it's okay to lose, a negotiation, who knows what it would do. Maybe it would have us scheduled at 2 a.m. and be like, ha, we win or something. I don't know.
That is such a great point. It brings me back in the digital ethics space. It brings me back to what I've always considered the digitally marginalized, and those are folks that just don't have opportunity or desire to interact much in the digital space. Could be very rural areas, could be generational, could be a number of reasons, geographical, but they just don't get a vote. And by not getting a vote, they're not considered in the sampling, and they're not considered in the values, and they're not considered in beyond and beyond. So these digital chambers that get created are serving similarly minded folks, and that is a danger in itself, right?
Yes, it sure is. And I think I would love to see that if these Generation Z continue opting out of certain social media, wouldn't that be an interesting turn of events that then they can't analyze Gen Z as much as they thought they could because the previous generation set a precedence of putting whatever out there, right? But yet Gen Z may not put out as much information about themselves. Maybe they won't. I don't know. But it's kind of interesting to think that the generations actually could end up getting less and less cooperative with putting their data out there, which I hope maybe we've brought enough attention in our generation to get them to do that, that in the future the AI actually won't be able to do and work as well on them as it thought. That could be an interesting flip of events. The option of the purpose opting out of these technologies because of the manipulation factors. Yeah. I mean, you were looking at it from digitally marginalized, but I'm thinking, well, what if they want to digitally opt out?
Exactly. Yes.
And I think there's probably more of that coming.
There's more. Yeah. Yes. And I love how you bring us back to people. We remove the complexities that really don't help the evaluation or analysis of the topic. And we stay with the brilliant simplicity of what is this really about, which actually brings us back to who is this really about. And it makes me think of if somebody asked me to come to a construction site and help out, I don't have the physical muscles to help all day long, right? By 6 o'clock, I'd be like, I can't give any more. And I would see other people that just keep on going. And the call to values that you have presented are just like that. We need to look at ourselves and what we're running and governing and saying, do we have what it takes to be able to withstand the momentum of AI and the growth of AI? And if we don't, we have to strengthen those muscles seriously, because AI is not going away. If anything, is proliferating all over, and we have to be able to keep up and master as we move along.
Exactly. Remain in control of the decisions. Yeah. It's an interesting time for AI as more and more people are trying to just build it in on the down low into so many different applications that we can't even keep track of anymore. Yeah. But I also think it's an interesting concept that people will start to opt out of the more manipulative ones. And the thought that just crossed my mind when you were saying that about construction is, what if you can be too good at AI to the point where, like Facebook and Google, people are like, well, you're a little too good at it, and I'm not going to trust you with all of my information, such as my healthcare information. I think what's interesting is that actually is a real dynamic that we have watched unfold before our eyes. A lot of people in the product space, in the technology space, who make the products assume if we make something really fantastic, they will come, right? Like the cornfield, build it and they will come, like the baseball show, right? And instead, what we're seeing is, ooh, if I build it a little too well, they might not come, actually. So we have to leave the humans in control, because what's happening is, if you try to remove too much human aspect, we see that Gen Z is opting out of certain platforms because they feel like, I'm not in control of this platform, so therefore I quit this platform. I'm taking my information and going home, like my ball. But so I hope that is not a lost learning on technology, producers, because that's important, that if you produce something that is removing them too much from their own decisions, and you're not giving them transparency, you're not giving them explainability, because you fear that your intellectual property is going to be taken, or whatever your, in my opinion, excuse is about why you're not going to, as a technology producer, explain to people what's going on in this very black box environment that we're in when it comes to algorithms, then I think people will just start to opt out. And we've already been seeing that. So I think that that's what I would leave with people is, definitely you have to build in as one of your values that you keep as a company, that the humans are always in control. And you have to drive that into the developers who are working with you. Because let's just face it, A lot of mid-level firms don't have the in-house staff to have data scientists just sitting around, twiddling their thumbs. They are hiring resources from outside the company in third party. And what happens with that is people just relinquish control inside the companies, that are wanting to produce these technology products. They tend to just go, well, those contract people know what they're doing, or those vendors seem to know what they're doing. Let's just let them, manage this for us. But those vendors don't know what your value statements are. They don't know what your policies are, and they don't care. And guess who's on the hook? An interesting thing that we were looking into for a research project with AI Truth is we were looking at the medical situation and who's on the hook if a robotic surgery goes wrong, if a robotic AI assisted surgery goes wrong. So let's say it's using imaging in real time as this robotic arm is trying to, focus in on the cancerous areas. The person who gets sued and has been sued is not the robotics company. It's not the AI generating robotics company. It's the doctor. So we have to remember that the companies so far are the ones that are getting sued, not the AI vendors.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's sad, but it's true.
It is true. So we are the buyer of the product, and that product can come back to us as we utilize that product, right? It's still the same as in privacy. Cortnie, would you close us with recommendations to developers, data scientists, folks that are using AI right now in the organization and perhaps are not getting the clear guidance at the risk, legal, policy level, values level? They just don't know. And they're making decisions, small ones apparently, but huge in terms of impact. What is it that you would leave them with for them to ponder or to work through in light of the absence of top guidance?
I always say the golden rule is the best. In other words, if someone internationally is watching this doesn't know what the golden rule is, it's do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I definitely think that in lieu of all these many thousands of frameworks that we've seen coming out, the end goal is if you wouldn't have this type of AI used on your own self or your mother or your dad or a family member, a kid, don't use it on other people. And if it's doing something or even mistakenly could possibly do something that you think that's not in my value system, then you need to reevaluate that process and that part of your instructional set. You have to build in, especially when we're starting to talk about more automation being paired with these models, you have to think about deconstructing the algorithm, the instructions. If this happens, what are all my real alternatives? And how can I make this a more customer friendly, more human friendly, more human friendly algorithm? Can I send out, if there's a chance, for example, if I have an urgency care situation, unmanned kiosks, yes, should I, if someone enters in, stabbing eye pain, for example, should I simply list things in front of their face that they can do about this? Or should I, because thinking about what it means to not have eyesight and possibly have eye pain just upon looking at text, should I then try to build in an extra module to this thing for eyesight specifically that says out loud, you need to find, we're going to connect you right away with a doctor who can talk to you and understand that you cannot probably see right now. That's the kind of empathy that is a human decision-making process built in to these decisioning systems. So yes, you have diagnosed that this person has the eye problem with your decisioning system. You've given a probability that this person has whatever this situation is. Now you should take upon yourself to understand what that means to that person and be in their shoes. So if I come back with that diagnostic, then what does it mean for the next action that needs to happen? And then you need to code or take your intelligent process automation or whatever it is that you're using, a way to sift through the most emergency contacts that the company has for doctors and immediately put them through. And in a way that can actually be understood because they're not going to be seeing things. Or
That's a great point.
that's just an example, but I mean, that's how we build empathy into actual systems is like that. And very few people are putting themselves in the place of another person and what they might be experiencing. So the more viewpoints that you can get, the more you can bring out outside opinions in the way of like using external boards, the better. If you were blind and having eye pain, would you really want to go be frustrated in front of an unmanned emergency kiosk in an emergency situation? No, probably not. So golden rule.
Great point. I would add to that very impactful and heavy lens of empathy. I would also add developing that practice of thinking through scenarios. And at least what I find in the classes that I teach is that I'm finding having to teach that is important prior to expecting them to think something through. The world that we have lived in for the last few decades, so just stimulating the brain in short-term sequences, has almost starved that deep thinking layer and that processing that gets you to the really critical thinking part of the brain. So you almost have to wake that up first to be able to get them just to foundation, to level one. And that's important, and that can also make much better data scientists and much better analytics folks and much better developers, because once that gets ignited and activated, then they go a lot farther.
But then there's also things that are just outside of our ability to even understand, because we're just, maybe we're a person in Africa who has never seen.
That's right.
A certain type of fruit, for example, like that we would have in America. And you're just like, or like when I went to Australia, I was shocked to find out that lemons were like $20 per lemon. So I was like, well, where's all the lemonade? You know, I wanted to have lemonade for this event or whatever. And little did I know, but just imagine that an AI is, you know, planning lemonade for your party in Australia, and, you know, and at the behest of some person's budget that's now going to be overblown by lemon costs. I mean, it's as simple as that sometimes. So sometimes you have to go outside yourself. Not sometimes, a lot of times you need to go outside yourself and just get as many different possible opinions from as many different types of people, both socioeconomically, to culturally, to just every aspect you can possibly think of. The more opinions and the more diverse opinions, the better.
Right. The better. Cortnie, we beg you to come back. It has been such a pleasure, and there's so much wealth of information and knowledge and wisdom coming from you. So I ask that you please come back and you visit us again with another session on all things AI and
love
digital
to.
ethics.
Of course.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.